Welcome back to Outdoors and Country Living. Earlier today, my husband and I were out at the gardens this morning and we picked some fresh rhubarb to make strawberry rhubarb jam. So today we're going to do that. This recipe actually comes from my husband's grandmother. She was well known for her jams and jellies, and since she's now passed and has been for a couple of years, we like to carry on family traditions. So today we're going to do that. First of all, you're going to need 3 pounds of fresh strawberries, and these have already been washed. 4 to 5 cups of chopped rhubarb. I chop it in 1 inch to 1/2 inch pieces. You could go larger, you could go smaller, just depends on your preference. 4 tablespoons of fresh lemon juice. I do not use bottled lemon juice. I've never tried it with bottled actually. I just use fresh because that's what works. And then 9 cups of granulated sugar. You can use white granulated sugar. We in our house use a natural cane sugar that's not overly processed. So first of all, we're going to start chopping the rhubarb. Again, 4 to 5 cups of the fresh chopped rhubarb. I'm just going to use my paring knife. Sometimes I use a larger chef's knife or butcher's knife, whatever you prefer to call it. I usually avoid the bad spots in the rhubarb. I honestly don't know if rhubarb is available in most supermarkets. I'm assuming it is. I've never had to shop for it outside of our garden. So if you can't find it in any supermarket, get some off of a friend or neighbor or family member who may grow it in their garden. Now I'm going to finish chopping this rhubarb and then I'll be back to show you the next steps. All right, rhubarb's chopped. I'm going to go ahead and put this in my stainless steel pot. You want to make sure when you're making jams, jellies, preserves, you want to use a stainless steel or a non-reactive pot. Stainless steel is non-reactive, so that's what I use because it's what I have. I'm going to go ahead and add that into the pot. Next, we're going to start taking the tops off of the strawberries. Some people call this hulling the strawberries or just removing the tops, whatever your preference is. I'm just going to use that as my scrap bowl. And then I cut the strawberries into quarters. You could do halves, I suppose. I've always just sliced the strawberries into fourths because that's what I prefer. Obviously, this takes a little bit of time. If you had a helper, it would go a little bit faster. So let me finish hulling these strawberries and we'll be back to show you more. All right, my husband was kind enough to step in and help me finish hulling those strawberries. So we've got all 3 pounds of the fresh strawberries quartered in this pan, and I'm just gonna stir to combine with the rhubarb before we add the sugar. Just make sure you use a large stainless steel pot. This is one I often use for soups and stews or spaghetti. So anything fairly large will work. Next, we're going to add the sugar. Again, this is 9 cups of sugar. Jams have a lot of sugar. My sugar container is very full. 1. 2. 3, 4. And I'm going to stop and combine this because if you put 9 cups of sugar on top of this, you could make a giant mess in your kitchen. I don't really feel like cleaning up sugar. Only 5 cups more to go. 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Just gonna stir again to combine this very carefully. This may look extremely full right now, but I promise you it does cook down quite a bit. It's just very full initially, getting everything mixed in. The next step is to add the fresh lemon juice, and actually that helps start to break down the fruits and the sugar. So I'm gonna go ahead. I have 2 tablespoons already squeezed in this dish here, but I wanted to show you. I use this little 1 ounce or 30 milliliter lemon juicer. It's equals 2 tablespoons. So this was 1/2 of the fresh lemon, which I got 2 tablespoons of juice from. So I'm gonna squeeze the other half. I think I bought this lemon juicer at TJ Maxx actually for $3. It's the best $3 I've ever spent as far as a kitchen tool goes. All right, that did produce another 2 tablespoons of fresh juice, lemon juice. And I'm just gonna pour that in here. Again, this is 4 tablespoons altogether of fresh lemon juice. I'm just gonna dump that in this pot. Stir to combine. Again, it's kind of difficult because of all the sugar and fruit. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this electric burner on medium, and that'll help start cooking the jam down. This process, once you get everything in the pot, it does take a little bit of time, but it's well worth it. So I'm just gonna let this sit here and start to warm up. Give it a stir every now and then. I'm not gonna leave the kitchen because it could burn, but you just wanna make sure you frequently come back and give it a stir around. One special tool I use with making jam is a candy thermometer, because as this progresses, I'll talk to you a little bit more about the importance of the specific temperature you need to get it to reach the gelling point, because the recipe that we're using, you don't use any store-bought boxed pectin. All right, it's been about 5 minutes since we turned the burner on medium heat, and you can see how it's really started to come together and cook down a little bit. It's so much easier to stir, obviously. But I just wanted to mention the fresh lemon juice the lemon juice itself doesn't actually contain pectin, or very little pectin. It's the acidity of the fresh lemon juice that helps the sugar make the jam gel and get to that thick consistency that we all desire on our toast or bagels or whatever you prefer, waffles even. So we're gonna continue to let this cook. Again, just occasionally give it a stir while you're working in the kitchen or running through the kitchen here and there, but I wouldn't go too very far from it because it does have the potential to burn. So we're gonna continue to watch this cook down, and you're gonna continue to see the changes and get to more of a jam consistency. Thanks. All right, we're back. Another 5 minutes has gone by, and you can see it's a little more liquefied now. Again, we're gonna continue cooking this on medium heat until it starts to bubble in the middle It's basically like a really low boil. And you want to continue, once it reaches that low boil in the pot, you want to reduce the heat to medium, low heat, between medium and low. And then that will continue to bubble and cook. You want a gentle bubbling in your pot at that point. I'll show that when we get there, but I just want to mention it now. You're going to want it just a gentle bubbling in the middle of your pot. You don't want it to violently boil or come to a rolling boil, so to speak. But we're just going to continue to cook this on medium heat until it gets to the point where it's gently bubbling in the center of the pot. So stay tuned. We've reached the gentle bubbling in the pot that I've described. This may foam and grow a little bit. Just give it a stir every now and then. The foaming and the growing in the pot or coming up more towards the top is normal. But at this point, we're going to reduce the heat to medium-low now. And it's just going to sit here and continue to cook down. You'll notice changes as we go. So keep watching. Okay, since we turned the heat down to medium-low, we want to maintain that gentle bubbling in the pot. I've added my candy thermometer to the side, and I'm going to continue to occasionally stir this every now and then and watch the temperature. You're looking for 220 degrees is the magic gelling point for the jam, but just give it an occasional stir so it doesn't have the potential to burn. And this is where you practice patience, but it's worth every minute that you do have to wait. Here the jam continues at a low boil, hovering around 215 degrees right now. You need to be patient at this point because the next 5 degrees seem to take a little bit of time. So keep watching it and occasionally stirring it and be patient. All right, the jam's reached 220 degrees, but just in case you don't have a candy thermometer on hand in your kitchen, I'll show you a couple of old-fashioned ways that you can see if it's done. So the first way I was taught was to spoon a little bit of the jam onto a small plate. And we're gonna let that sit up a second because it's very hot. It needs to cool just a little bit. The other method, before we finish with that, is a spoon method. Either the spoon I was stirring with or get another spoon out of your silverware drawer. And I just dip it in the jam, and you're looking for what's called sheeting instead of more of a dripping. Let me see if I can do it this other way to show you. It's very hot right now, so it's quite liquidy, but as the jam cools, it'll set up. But it's coming off more in a larger portion than just little drips at a time. We just turned the burner off on this, so it's still rather hot. But then also on this bigger bamboo spoon that I was using to stir, you can tell it's starting to gel a little bit nicer, and how the fruit is sticking to the spoon. I would highly recommend that you use a candy thermometer. You can pick it up at any big box store for $3 to $5, I would say. It's something that I use quite often, especially making candy, obviously, but with jams, jellies, any kind of spread, basic fruit spread. So onto the saucer trick. My grandmother and my mother taught me you can also take your finger and swipe through the jam, and if it, see how it's taken some time to close back off, then that's also an indicator that your jam will gel and set nicely. So again, I prefer a candy thermometer, but you can use some of these older tricks if you don't have one on hand. So the next step would be placing this hot jam into some hot jars, and then we'll show you how we can those. Time to fill the jam in the jars. I'm gonna ladle this hot jam into some hot jars. This is one thing I will use a canning funnel for, just because it can be messy. fill each jar basically up to the bottom of the canning funnel or the bottom of the neck of the jar. And then carefully move it to your next jar. This recipe makes approximately 6 pint jars of jam. Okay, now I do clean the rims off on the jam. I just use a damp paper towel and just run it around the rim just to make sure there isn't any jam on the top of the jar, because that will cause the seals not to, or the lids not to seal correctly. Some people call them lids, some people call them seals. You may hear me say both terms. It's the same thing. So these will be canned in the water canner for 10 minutes at a rolling boil. So I'm gonna finish wiping off the rims of these jars, and then we'll put the lids or the seals and the rings on. I'm gonna seal up the jars here with the lids and the rings. The jam is very hot. I'm just gonna tighten them fingertip tight. And then we'll put them in the water bath canner here. Cover them with about an inch or 2 of water. Ooh. And then they'll be brought to a boil for 10 minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and load them up here in the rack. I went ahead and lowered the jar rack into the water canner. Now I'm just gonna add some hot tap water. You want to bring your water about an inch or 2 over the top of the jars. It's about an inch over the top of the jars. I'm gonna turn the burner on to high. I always do high heat because you want to bring this water canner to a rolling boil. So go ahead and put the lid on. And that'll come to a boil, and once it starts a rolling boil, then that's when you set your timer for 10 minutes. This is what it looks like at a rolling boil, and I've started the timer for 10 minutes. Time is up. It's boiled 10 minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the heat off, grab the rack and lift it up, and I immediately get the jars out. And I'm just gonna set them here on this cutting board, and they should start popping, indicating that they've sealed. And we'll leave them set here overnight. Some people let them set for 24 hours. But in the morning, they should be ready to box up and place in our basement for future use. Hopefully this is helpful. Thank you for watching.